Opposition, Keir Starmer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I heard what the Prime Minister just said about the Post Office scandal. It is a huge injustice. People lost their lives, their liberty and their livelihood, and they've been waiting far too long for the truth, for justice and for compensation. So I'm glad the Prime Minister is putting forward a proposal. We will look at the details, and I think it's the job of all of us to make sure that it delivers the justice that is so needed. Mr. Speaker, back in 2022, when Boris Johnson claimed he would send asylum seekers to Rwanda, one ambitious Tory MP had reservations. He agreed with Labour that it wouldn't work. It was a waste of money. It was the latest in a long line of gimmicks. Does the Prime Minister know what happened to that MP?
Well, Mr. Speaker, what that honourable gentleman refers to is a document that he hasn't seen, I haven't seen, and has been reported second-hand in a bunch of media newspapers. But what I can tell him is I am absolutely clear that you do need to stop the boats, and that's what this government and that MP is going to deliver.
I notice he didn't deny it, Mr. Speaker. I'm not surprised. £400 million of taxpayer money down the drain. No one sent to Rwanda. Small boats still coming. It's hardly a surprise he wanted to scrap the scheme when he was trying to sneak in as Tory leader. But he's been caught red-handed opposing the very thing that he's now made his flagship policy. Which member should we listen to? The one before us today, or the one who used to believe in something?
Mr. Speaker, I've always been crystal clear. You do need to have an effective deterrence to finally solve this problem. In fact, the National Crime Agency agree that you need, in their words, an effective removals and deterrence agreement. And that's why, after becoming Prime Minister, I negotiated a new deal with Albania, thanks to which we have seen a 93% drop in illegal arrivals from Albania. That's how Australia stopped the boats. That's why Italy, Germany and Austria are all looking at similar schemes. He's the only one who's opposed to a proper deterrent. Not because it doesn't work, because he doesn't actually believe in controlling migration, Mr. Speaker. Every single time he picks the people smugglers over the British people.
Mr. Speaker, we should smash the gangs, process the claims and end hotel use. That's our plan. And unlike the Prime Minister, I believe in it. But
I'm going to hear the questions. I don't want interruptions, please. It's very important. It's a very important topic, and I take it seriously. I hope members also wish to start taking it seriously. Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, last year he started the year saying he was Mr. Steady. Then at his conference he was Mr. Change. Now he's flipped back to Mr. More of the same. It doesn't matter how many relaunches, flip-flops he does, he'll always be Mr. Nobody. And here's the tragedy of his leadership. He spends the whole time trying to convince people not to believe their own eyes, pretending that debt is falling, that the economy is going gangbusters, the NHS is in great shape. When he finally finds something he was right about, the Rwanda gimmick, he can't even take credit for it. When's he going to stop pretending that up is down, that black is white, admit that whether it's the economy, immigration, the NHS, he has failed?
Mr. Speaker, well, let's just go through his checklist. He talks about the backlog, 112,000 decisions made last year, a higher number than in any year in the past 2 decades, Mr. Speaker. He talked about hotels. Well, the first 50 are being closed and there are more to come, Mr. Speaker. He talks about the numbers. Well, they were down by over a third last year, Mr. Speaker, the first time that's happened. And then he talked, Mr. Speaker, he talked about smashing the gangs. Well, if he does care about smashing the gangs, why doesn't he own up to the fact that when it came to the Nationality and Borders Act, he blocked delayed and voted against the powers in that act, which have allowed us to now arrest hundreds and hundreds of people connected with that illegal trade who have been sentenced to hundreds of years in prison. He opposed that because he chooses the criminal gangs over the British people every time.
I don't think we are. Keir Starmer.
Mr. Speaker, we can all see what's happened here. Just like he knows the debt isn't falling and taxes are going up, he knows the Rwanda gimmick won't work. But he can't be honest about it because he's too scared of his own MPs. Doesn't he wish he'd stuck to his guns rather than to allow himself to be taken hostage by his own party?
Mr. Speaker, we're debating this because we have taken a stand and we're delivering the toughest migration plan ever to end the legal challenges and actually get flights off the ground. And let's be clear about this. He doesn't have a single practical idea about how to stop the boats. But that's because he doesn't actually care about controlling migration. This is a person who described all immigration law as racist, Mr. Speaker. He thinks limits on economic migration are, in his words, economic vandalism. It didn't even feature once in his 5 missions, and he didn't mention it once in his conference speech. The truth is, he's pro-free movement, he's anti-border control, and he can never be trusted to stop the boats.
I think we should smash the gangs. And I spent 5 years of my life doing exactly. This is the party that's lost control of the borders. And whilst he's tending to the Tory party, the country is left without government. Yes. A collapse in dentistry, leaving people literally pulling out their own teeth. Flood defences completely exposed. Hundreds of thousands of children still out of school. His government appears blissfully uninterested in what's going on outside the walls of Westminster. Does he realise how ludicrous it looks when he spends his time boasting whilst Britain is breaking?
Mr. Speaker, I'm glad he brought up our schools, because there's nothing more important than ensuring our children get a world-class education. And that's why I'm pleased that, in spite of Labour opposing every reform that we made, our children are now the best readers in the Western world, Mr. Speaker. But he's right that attendance is important, and that's why we're investing millions of pounds more to provide support for absent pupils. We launched a national campaign, and just this week, we've doubled the number of attendance hubs to support over 1,000 at the most vulnerable schools. But I am surprised to hear him raise that topic, because from longer lockdowns or voting against our minimum service laws, his priority has always been keeping our children out of school, Mr. Speaker. It's always the same with him. There's no plan. It's just peddling one thing to his union friends and another thing to the British people.
New year, new nonsense. Every week he stands here and tells the country they should be thanking him, not questioning him. Point out that the view on the ground is very different to that from his private jet, and he says you're talking the country down. He just doesn't get it. He doesn't get what a cost of living crisis feels like. He doesn't know any schools where kids no longer turn up, and he doesn't understand what it's like to wait for a hospital appointment. Doesn't the country deserve so much better than a Prime Minister who simply doesn't get Britain?
Mr. Speaker, well, from the last week we had, yet another half-hour speech from the Honourable Gentleman, and what a surprise, yet again, it didn't contain a single new idea. We've had 4 years of him as Labour leader, and it's still all slogan, no plan, Mr. Speaker. Now, just this weekend, Mr. Speaker, we're delivering on our plan to cut people's taxes, Mr. Speaker. He doesn't have a plan. We've got a plan to stop the boats. He doesn't have a plan. And we've got a plan to get people off welfare and into work. He doesn't have a single idea. It's crystal clear, Mr. Speaker. Stick with us to deliver the long-term change that the country needs. Don't go back to square one with him.